So I got home from spending the morning at a watershed hike um, hosted by Santa Fe Watershed. And I think I found out about this from an email list from the Sierra Club of Northern New Mexico, which I signed up for when I first got here, trying to look for hiking ideas. And tried to sign up for this hike in July. It was full, and then got into the August one, so that was today. It was a scorcher. They thought it was going to be cooling down in August, but it has not yet. And we were introducing ourselves in the opening circle, and that's when I realized that I haven't intentionally sought it out, but it has sort of fallen into my lap to visit several headwaters of rivers during my travels, mainly my solo travels around the country. So I've had this memory and opportunity to see through hiking the source for the drinking water of many of the regions that I've stayed in. I remember writing an essay about the headwaters of the Colorado River, which I saw on my cross-country drive from California to Chicago in 2021. And I did visit the headwaters of the river that goes through Luang Prabang, the Guangxi Falls River. I mean, whatever's above the Guangxi Falls, the source of that, we also hiked to when I was in Laos. In Boston, I feel like, well, it's not the headwaters, but it's the drinking water above Walden Pond. I don't remember that one, but I want to go through my journals now and find out all the headwaters that I visited. But and of course, Yosemite, the life-changing headwaters of the Tuolumne River and the snow of the Merced River basin, that just to see that, to understand the cycle through the seasons, and to have spent time on the land the way I have at Yosemite was the life-changing moment that really made me understand what this is all about. And it touched my heart. It wasn't a mental thing because I didn't understand any of the science. It was just like beholding through the act of being in these places and the effort it takes to get to these places, how how inaccessible it is in the wintertime, and how many humans sacrifice themselves to create these modes of transportation that we have available to us to get there as kind of lay citizens that are not stewarding the land to get there. So my takeaway points from this hike, it was extremely educational because we happened to have the manager of the city of Santa Fe's water division, and his wife, who's a geology professor at one of the local universities, and then the executive director of the Santa Fe Watershed, speaking along this hike. And it was amazing. It was roughly 22 people were hiking, and we went 5 miles round trip in this heat up a fire road, and it was a moderate incline, but there was definitely some detours we took down to the river, and I say it in quotes because it's mainly a managed and human controlled river at this point. But just to be with people that are out, hiking and do this for fun on a Saturday and are kind of nerds about fire suppression and managed burn controls and water management and all of the collaborations that have to take place to manage water. So really thankful for people that have found a way in their lives to get to the point where they can work in this field and share their enthusiasm with the public, because it affects our lives every day. And I was sort of noticing that the education I got from today, which was basically that this is a very, very vulnerable water region, which you can intuit by seeing that it's in the desert, but to understand where we are right now with the decades of drought that we've had, plus all of the pressures on the Colorado River, which is 40% of the Santa Fe water source, because the Santa Fe River just has not been sufficient for almost a century. And they're planning for major growth in the population of this area. We don't have the models. That's the takeaway. Our mathematical models that we've been using to predict and manage and make decisions about water allocation have been broken for several years, and there's no mathematical regression that can be done, because there's like every year the data keeps breaking. It's just off the curve. And so the agreements that we had on the Colorado River were broken by California like so long ago. So Arizona, Utah, New Mexico have been under allocated for years, and now they have more demand on the undersupply. But that's really the only backup plan that there is, because there's no additional replenishing sources of the underground water, the water table, which is another percentage of the water here. And so there's a lot of talk about collaborations and sharing regionally, which just means buying water from other people who own the rights to the same basic source, which is the sky, the snow, the Colorado River, and whatever is underground. We can't manufacture more water. And the geologist made a really interesting point about how difficult it is, because we want to switch away from petroleum-based energy, but that requires mining for precious metals. And so she said that the number of permits for precious metal mining in this general region went from 1 to 5 to 50, and now it's over 400 permits that are under review or have been approved in the last 5 years. So that's the kind of exponential growth we're seeing to get the minerals for the various green technologies that we are needing. And so it's really interesting to try to sit with this feeling that you get when you realize, especially, thinking about if I think about if I'm going to move to a place, how do I come into a place and not create more impact? How do I live in a leave no trace way, so to speak, or at least try to minimize my impact on or participation in these systems that are going to be unsustainable? There's no real answer for it. But I think there's some balance between just throwing up our arms and saying there's nothing you can do, so just fuck it and live. And that's one end of the spectrum. And the other is trying to be perfectionistic and find something that's so ideal it doesn't exist. So understanding the ends of those spectrums is important. And for me, one end of the spectrum is just looking at Zillow for a particular zip code and just doing that sort of consumerist shopping of what's available in real estate, and just shopping, as if you're in a store and taking stuff off the shelf, versus this, what I'm trying to do, which is feel into and understand what is the landscape here, and what what is it doing to have these parcels of land where people are accessing their private or shared wells, and then, the urban development that's going on just a few miles away. And it's really interesting because this trip, and so what I learned about the flow of the Santa Fe River is that it starts up just beyond the top of the hike that I've been doing up in the Santa Fe National Forest on that Alamo Vista Trail. Just beyond that is the actual lake, the Santa Fe Lake, that is the headwaters. It's of the Santa Fe River, which is where we were today. And when it goes dry in the city, I don't know where it goes, if it's underground or whatever, but it kind of runs dry through the city and flows down to Cochiti Lake, which is another place I will find myself later in this trip. So that's fascinating to me, that I sort of stumbled upon both the headwaters and the terminus of this very important river for this region. Not planning, that wasn't like my plan when I made the route for this trip, that I'm going to see the beginning and end, but that's what's going to happen. And I think there's something very sacred about visiting the water and then hearing the story, the history of this landscape. It's so interesting to know that the hills above Santa Fe where we were, according to this history, were dramatically changed by the arrival of the railroad and the bringing in of large quantities of livestock who would hang out here and graze, I guess, while they were waiting to be traded. And they completely decimated these landscapes of the original grasses that were there pre-1880. And that kind of vacuuming of the landscape made it extremely vulnerable to erosions during rainstorms, and then sediment in the river that then impacted the dams that were established for the city of Santa Fe water. And so in 1932, there was an act of Congress to close the watershed for management of this upstream area. And there was a lot of language I didn't understand around fire suppression and fire treatment, and what they've done to try to balance the reforestation of these hills with the controlled burns to sort of manage the growth of the forest so that it's not too thick but not too thin. And just hearing about the vulnerability of the watershed to fire in the future, that was daunting. And really, like, the pace that humans can intervene in some of these restoration projects, at the same time, it's like it's encouraging to know that we can do anything, but it's also like so daunting to hear how fragile some of these efforts are to one unpredictable catastrophic burn that can happen from a lightning strike, which we want. We want more rain, we want more storms. And also, the longer the drought happens, the more risk those storms are for everyone in a lot of ways. So really good education. I don't know what to take from it emotionally, but I'm trying to get out of my mind and just take the bodily experience of what it was like to walk along this river, to hear the stories of the history of the land, and to appreciate the timelines of Mother Nature, the earth that we are so tied to and yet so disconnected from. in terms of our knowledge and awareness. So today was good.